I think that Yasser felt that it was his last days in Palestine when he kissed the people while going into the plane. It was so touching. You feel that death is approaching. You know, the smell of death, you smell death. So I smell the smell of death.
In his last 4 weeks of life, nearly 50 doctors from Palestine, Egypt, Tunisia, Jordan, and France try to save him. They test him for virtually every known disease, including some of the world's rarest conditions. But every single test comes back negative. In this exact room, Yasser Arafat dies at 3:30 in the morning on the 11th of November, 2004. And it's been an unsolved case ever since.
Is this some unusual illness or whatever? Or on the other hand, is it some poison?
8 years ago, Arafat's medical files were handed over to the Palestinian Authority. While they promised a full investigation, little has happened since. But there was a second copy held by his widow, Suha. She agreed to give his entire medical files to Al Jazeera for this exclusive investigation, along with his x-rays and his final possessions, his clothes, medicines, even his signature headscarf. And we have taken them to the best laboratories in Europe for forensic testing. For the scientists, every fragment is rich with possibility, even his hair.
You can perform the analysis even 10 years after collection.
Al Jazeera has undertaken a 9-month investigation to try to find out what killed Yasser Arafat. Was it natural causes or murder?
If I know that Yasser was poisoned, it will close a chapter of the enigma of his death.
Yasser Arafat. Over 4 decades, he was the single most important international figure in Middle East politics. The world's best-known Arab, he is the face of popular resistance, the one man who drove the Israeli-Palestinian conflict onto the world agenda.
He was the one that invented the peace process. It was not the Israelis, not the Americans. He created the peace process in 1988. So he recognized the two-state solution, and by this he unleashed the peace process. He was the only one who could have given legitimacy to an agreement that is always painful, that is always imperfect.
But in 2000, peace talks collapse, and the Second Intifada begins. The international community overwhelmingly pins the blame directly on Arafat. And months later, Israelis elect Ariel Sharon, who campaigned on the promise to deal with Arafat harshly. Negotiations come to a full stop, though some channels are left open.
Prime Minister of Israel, Ariel Sharon, told me face to face, my response, my reaction will be totally different. And I told him, is it a threat? He said, I don't threaten. You guys know my policy. Anybody is a threat to the Israeli people, I will handle him, I will remove him.
In 2002, Israeli tanks roll into Ramallah and destroy much of the Palestinian Authority headquarters, also known as the Muqata. Yasser Arafat is now confined to a 2-room apartment surrounded by rubble. Outside, the pressure against him builds.
I call on the Palestinian people to elect new leaders. Leaders not compromised by terror.
During most of my meetings here in Paris, in Israel, as well as in the United States, Arafat was seen as the devil. He was the man who was blocking any process towards peace. There was this idea that when Arafat will be out of the game, then everything will be easier.
It was a fantasy to think that you can reach a settlement with his successors.
But regime change was exactly what Washington and Tel Aviv had in mind.
هذه سنة الحياة الديمقراطية التي اخترناها طريقا لا رجعة عنه لشعبنا الفلسطيني.
By 2003, attempts to strip Arafat of his power and hand it over to others have failed. Isolated by his enemies and abandoned by his friends, Arafat nevertheless clings to power. With his international standing badly damaged, threats against his life went unchallenged.
We will have to focus on the murders and those who inspire the murders and orchestrate the operations, and if necessary to get rid of them. Arafat is not excluded.
Sharon's political allies were not the only ones talking tough. In 2004, he walks from an earlier pledge he made to the United States that he would not harm Arafat. His intentions go from private to public.
אמרתי בפגישתנו הראשונה, לפני כ3 שנים, אני קיבלתי את בקשתך שלא לפגוע פיזית בערפאת.
It was clear that we are heading to a serious deadlock, which could cause Arafat his political leadership, and it could cause him his life as well.
October the 12th, 2004. Arafat begins another day under Israeli siege, restricted to his quarters.
There is nothing in the file or the documentation that suggests that he is anything other than perfectly normal, perfectly fine for his age.
That evening, 4 hours after eating, Arafat becomes violently ill. His medical notes record that he was feeling faint, with nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain, but no fever. The journey to understand what caused Arafat's initial symptoms begins far away from Palestine, in northern Scotland. Our first consulting expert is Professor Dave Barkley, a world-renowned forensic scientist whose expertise is solving cold cases.
I've been studying all the paperwork that could be retrieved from the medical records. It's a really good file. I've been going through all that, trying to look at the context, trying to work out the course of his illness, the treatments he was given, and, if I possibly could, what caused that illness in the first place.
According to the file, the first doctor to examine Arafat was this man, Omar Daka, his personal physician for almost 20 years. Arafat had suffered from flu a year before, and Daka believed it was just a rerun.
There wasn't the aggressive management in those first few days, but the reason for that is quite obvious. It wasn't appreciated by anybody that he was actually gravely ill.
On October the 17th, 2004, Arafat's health gets worse. The Palestinians call in an Egyptian team for a second opinion, but they too misread the symptoms.
It was nothing but gastritis, inflammation of the stomach.
Dr. Omar Zaki, now a consultant anesthetist in Cairo, was a member of the Egyptian team that treated Arafat.
We stayed for another 2 days. It was in Ramadan, and we went back. He was in good shape.
To review Arafat's medical treatment, we take his entire file and x-rays to Switzerland, home of the University Center for Legal Medicine.
Preserve the confidentiality of this.
Professor Patrice Mongeon and his team of forensic pathologists and toxicologists initiate a rigorous re-examination of the case, focusing on Arafat's initial care.
All these kind of investigations have to be done, of course, in a modern hospital, and it's difficult for me to imagine that it could have been done in Ramallah in the condition where President Arafat was staying.
October the 20th, Arafat's blood platelet count, a crucial health indicator, suddenly nosedives. He now runs a high risk of dying from internal bleeding.
After 1 week, I think that it became urgent to organize such a transfer.
That urgent transfer was delayed. Instead, his doctors in Ramallah continue their guesswork. They experiment with an assortment of antibiotics and steroids. The treatments fail. These insights are now available because of the decision reached by Arafat's widow to give Al Jazeera all of his medical files, as well as the memories they bring back.
What do you know about Arafat's condition?
I was calling him, he could not answer. They told me that he was sick, he has flu. Then the third day I could talk to him, I was getting crazy. He was so much on the phone, so much nice. Usually he is very formal with me because everybody is hearing us on the phone. And he told me, I love you. And I did not know, I said, why you say it? I said, no, I love you and I love Zahwa.
October the 26th, 14 days have now passed. Arafat's platelet count drops again. His condition is now critical. The Palestinians panic. They call the Egyptians back to Ramallah and bring in yet another medical team from Tunisia.
A week later, acutely, almost midnight, he said, we have to go now. He's in very bad shape and we have to go now to see him.
When they arrive, Arafat is trapped in a painful cycle of nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. The Tunisians give Suha an update.
Listen, it's not reassuring. It's not a normal influenza. He's losing all his stomach. It's all the time diarrhea. This flu is not a flu.
The Egyptian doctors are also concerned. They want to perform an endoscopy, a procedure to examine and take samples from the lining of Arafat's stomach. Before doing so, they ask the Palestinian doctors, who remain in charge of his treatment.
You say, we have done it. There is no need. They said, we did all what can be done. I mean, they were treating the subject lightly.
What happened to these crucial samples remains a mystery.
Unfortunately, the samples were lost and were never transmitted to the laboratory specialized in this domain.
October the 28th, the Palestinian Authority call in yet another team, this time from Jordan.
You want to escape all the responsibility, not to be blamed for accusation of his death. So he should be transferred to a Western country.
Preparations begin to move Arafat to France. It required days of bartering with the Israelis, but they finally agree that he can go, and crucially, should he survive, even come back.
At 5 o'clock, I heard the helicopters, Jordanian helicopters, 2 big helicopters coming around the Muqata. Yasser is hearing this. It's the first time. This military helicopter is coming just to take him and not to bomb him. So he was very weak and we trying to dress him with the nurses. It was so touching.
After 17 days of failed medical treatment, his illness is now well advanced. He has disseminated intravascular coagulation, known as DIC. Without discovering what triggered this condition, he will die.
The red blotches may well be small bleeds into the skin, yellow, maybe jaundiced eyes, and those are symptoms that you would expect to get in somebody with DIC.
DIC is a condition with many causes. It presents itself in patients suffering from a range of cases, including severe burns, snake bites, even radiation exposure.
DIC is a blood disorder, a symptom of something really serious happening in the body. Normally, your blood is flowing around the body. If you get a cut, you don't want the blood to keep on flowing out of that, so a switch is thrown and little clots start to form at the point of that insult where the cut is. DIC means that that switch has been thrown all over the body at the same time, and you're getting lots of little clots going around the body. The blood gets out of kilter with itself. It almost starts eating itself.
October the 29th, Arafat arrives at the Percy Military Hospital. He is taken straight to the hematology ward. The file thoroughly describes what the French did next.
The way they treated it was exactly right. And in this case, they needed to stop the little blood clots getting worse, and they used heparin to do that, which was correct. They needed to give plasma and blood clotting agents through blood transfusion. And that's exactly what they did as well.
October the 30th, Arafat responds well to treatment. He stops vomiting, his nausea and diarrhea are gone, he's even able to hold down some food. The French run dozens of tests using some of the world's most sophisticated medical diagnostic equipment. But according to their own records, they never uncover what's causing the DIC. The French do not address the possibility that poison might be involved until 4 days after Arafat arrives. They order tests, but it's already been a full 3 weeks since the start of his symptoms.
Why wait before collecting the blood, urine, and stools for the toxicology? If some poisoning had to be suspected, of course, the samples have to be collected very, very rapidly and without any delay.
November the 3rd, Arafat suddenly relapses and begins the last and final phase of his unexplained condition.
He wanted to go out of the bed, and he was screaming, and I just said, please, Yasser, calm down, calm down, calm down, calm down. And I sat on the floor, I put my hands on him, and he was crying, and not knowing me, and crying. I looked at him, Yasser, you're crying. What? He was looking, just not talking, looking at me, and tears were coming off here.
And then he lapses into a coma, and it's a serious coma. And neither I nor any of the doctors at Percy had the faintest idea why that happened.
There is no recovery, and he will never speak again. As the hospital shifts him to the intensive care unit, Suha clings to hope. At her request, the French agree to play Arafat's favorite Quran recitation throughout the ward.
When Yasser heard the Quran, I was looking at his hands, and he would make like this, or he would. I called the doctor. I said, "Doctor, doctor, come." He had a sign on his eye. Said, "Oh no, Suha, this is a neurological sign. It's normal like this. Don't get so much excited, you know."
November the 4th, news of Arafat's coma is leaked. The leadership of the Palestinian Authority now believe Arafat's death is a matter of days. His wife Suha believes they're plotting to seize power and calls Al Jazeera.
ليكن معلوما لشرفاء الشعب الفلسطيني أن حفنة من المستورثين قادمين غدا إلى باريس يحاولون دفن أبو عمار وهو حي.
Acting Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas and his delegation are received as the presumptive new leadership. Back at Percy Hospital, the staff become more concerned about the involvement of poison. While he lay deep in a coma, they take numerous samples of his blood, urine, and stool, which they provide in great secrecy to the French National Police and military radiological detection labs. Under aliases, the samples are analyzed for everything ranging from arsenic to cocaine.
The name Etienne Louvet and Frédéric Martipon are both nicknames for Yasser Arafat in the hospital. They use this name to protect the analysis and prevent any leaking of any analysis.
On November the 8th, doctors initiate a limited test for radioactive poisons, measuring gamma activity only. Tests on almost a liter of his urine come back negative. But there were further radiological tests they did not perform, particularly for rare nuclear materials.
The CT scan that has been done on the 9th of November is really abnormal because, as you can see, there are a lot of hemorrhages in the brain, the brainstem, and in the ventricle of the brain. And here, these different things in white is the presence of blood in the brain.
On November the 11th, 2004, after 4 weeks clinging to life, Arafat loses the battle. Though he dies of a massive brain hemorrhage, the mystery remains. What is the original event that drives his illness? The most logical way to answer that would have been through an autopsy, which in suspicious cases like this are routine, if not mandatory. But the atmosphere in France is charged. As Arafat's body leaves for its long journey home, discussions over where his state funeral should be and who will assume his powers drown out any serious talk about having a post-mortem.
I did not ask for an autopsy. It did not even occur to me to ask for an autopsy. You know, when you are under the shock, nothing occurs to you.
After a long procession that included a stop in Egypt, Arafat's body is taken for final burial in Ramallah. Even in death, the controversy over what killed Arafat remains very much alive. Intense speculation over the years has focused on several theories, all of them unfounded. The most stubborn myth is that he died of AIDS.
He didn't have AIDS. They did 2 HIV tests, both of which were negative.
These French tests confirm the results of Dr. Tufik Shaban, who is part of the Tunisian team treating Arafat in Ramallah.
It is my specialty.
HIV?
HIV. It is my specialty. ولذا متحقق لي حاجة خارجة على HIV. خارجة.
The things that we know he wasn't suffering from include most of the popular choices at the time. He wasn't suffering from leukemia. In fact, his bone marrow seemed to be all right to the very end.
There was no liver cirrhosis, no traces of cancer, no positive results. It's not really in favor of infectious disease. It is a pity that the postmortem has not been ordered immediately after the death.
We would have ensured that we kept large quantities of the liver, and we would have kept the hair and the nails and analysed them.
We asked French officials whether this was done, and if not, why not? Michel Ali El-Meri was defense minister in 2004, in charge of the military as well as its hospitals.
À ma connaissance, il n'y a pas de prélèvement sanguin qui soit conservé après le décès des personnes, sauf s'il y a une procédure judiciaire qui est en cours. Si aujourd'hui, vous dites il faut faire une analyse, adressez-vous à la famille de M. Arafat.
We do just that and ask Miss Arafat whether she has any of her late husband's belongings that might yield forensic clues.
This is the bag that Percy Hospital gave me after my husband died. I kept it safely, and it contains all the personal belongings of my husband, from his hat that he wore in the hospital till his underwear. Maybe with your scientists you can reveal the truth about his death.
After mining through the bag, the doctors discover enough hair to perform new tests.
We will have enough sample to try, analyze, and to look for a different substance.
But even more promising, they identify stains that are later determined to be Arafat's blood and urine. Using the most advanced technologies available, they will spend the next several months trying to crack the mystery of what killed Yasser Arafat. Nearly 9 years have passed since the suspicious death of Yasser Arafat. Doctors still do not know what caused his death. There was no autopsy. And in 2012, our best hope of a breakthrough may be hiding inside this bag. Al Jazeera has ordered a forensic examination of Arafat's last personal effects and the clothing he wore in his final days. The Swiss begin a painstaking process to uncover what may have killed Arafat.
If you wanted to get rid of Yasser Arafat, you would use something undetectable, something that would be very difficult to find. How easy would it be to get a poison into Yasser Arafat or anybody else? It would be child's play. A tiny amount is necessary to kill you, but that's distributed over the whole of the body.
Including the hair. The Swiss scientists begin testing samples discovered in Arafat's headwear and garments.
The benefit of hair is that as the hair grows, it lays down drugs and poisons in the shaft of the hair. So if I die the same day of a poison, the only place that poison will be is in the root of the hair. But if I was poisoned a week earlier, it's going to be a centimetre up from the root of the hair.
The first task, to ensure the hair is actually Yasser Arafat's. For this, the Institute's Chief of Toxicology, Dr. Mark Augsburger, orders tests on DNA samples taken from Arafat's widow and 17-year-old daughter Zawa. Weeks later, there is no uncertainty.
We are sure that it's Yasser Arafat's hairs because we perform DNA analysis too.
Still, the scientists are limited to what could be recovered. Only 23 milligrams of hair, a tiny amount. It's enough for just one toxicology screening, with no opportunity for follow-up. The results come back. From arsenic to zinc, no presence of heavy metal toxins, but there's a qualified finding.
We have no idea about the date of the transfer of the hair from the scalp to the head, so it could be before the 12th October or after.
Having ruled out obvious poisons, we asked the Swiss to consider less conventional ones.
After we obtained the results, we decided to send those samples to our colleague in a radiological institute to look at other elements like polonium.
Polonium. When Arafat fell ill in 2004, no doctor would have suspected its use as a poison. But 2 years later, Alexander Litvinenko, a former Russian spy turned dissident, died a lingering death in a London hospital. Scientists later established that he ingested polonium given to him by attackers at this London restaurant. The only other methods to deliver this radioactive substance would be through injection or inhalation. A lethal dosage is not even visible to the naked eye. So after a month of testing at the Institute of Radiation Physics, the scientists are astounded by what they find. High levels of polonium in Arafat's toothbrush, as well as 3 samples from his clothes. A urine stain in his underwear, a blood stain from his hospital cap that he wore as he died, even the sweat-stained collar from his tracksuit. Polonium does exist in nature, in very low levels, formed when radioactive lead decays. So the Swiss want to know if this is natural polonium, what's called supported polonium, or is it the unsupported version, which can only come from a nuclear reactor. They examined additional samples from the same bag. Items that had been visibly worn contained significantly higher polonium levels than those that had not. This suggests the polonium is coming from contact with Arafat's bodily fluids, rather than the fabric. We caught up with the lead scientist at the Geneva airport to learn the preliminary results.
We found that there was a higher value of polonium than what we were expecting, but again, we have to be sure that this higher value is natural or not natural. And it's not sufficient to see a higher value to conclude that it's not natural.
For this, Dr. Boshoud's team needs 3 months. If the polonium found in Arafat's samples stay the same, this would mean it's natural polonium supported by the decay of lead. But if the polonium levels decrease, that would confirm that they are artificial or unsupported, meaning Arafat was exposed to polonium made in a nuclear reactor.
We know that at the time when Arafat was at the hospital, they did make some measurement of several liters of urine. And we saw the result of the measurement. They were all negative, but they did not search polonium as such. So what we need is to have access on this urine sample.
Professor Mongeon and his team agree. They ask if Al Jazeera would approach Miss Arafat, the only person eligible under French law to request the frozen vials of blood and urine, which they expected the authorities to have kept. Our lawyer in Paris, David Mehoud, prepares the detailed applications. To ensure they don't get lost, Miss Arafat sets out on a journey she has not made since 2004.
This is the route that I was doing every time that I wanted to go to the hospital, you know. And it reminds me all the memories, all the bad memories.
On the way to the hospital, her daughter Zawa phones.
Hi, Zahwa. Hi, Mama. Now I'm on my way to the hospital where Papa died, Zahwa. And you know that I'm going with Clayton, and we told you about it already, and I'm going to ask about the samples and about the blood samples and urine to know more the truth about Papa.
Okay, go ahead.
What do you think? What do you think?
Do it.
I shall do it?
With her family strongly behind her and a secret camera to witness the handover, Miss Arafat delivers the letters straight to the Percy Hospital mailroom. While we wait for a reply, we start a new line of inquiry to track down the medical professionals here at Percy who treated Yasser Arafat, in case they have any evidence not recorded in the official files. To do this, we obtain Miss Arafat's written permission to ask questions on her behalf. There are more than 30 we need to find, and they do not want to talk.
Je voudrais parler avec Professor Bruno Patz. Bonjour, je voudrais parler avec Dr. Roy. Okay. Do you have another phone number for him? Dr. Fago, Dr. Beret. Professor de Revel? Dr. Vest? Thank you. Professor Cordoliani?
This is becoming a typical outcome, despite receiving the letter from Madame Arafat that expressly permits us to discuss her late husband's care and treatment by these doctors. They're all saying it's impossible because of medical secrecy. We decide to become more assertive. If they won't talk to us, we'll go and talk with them. We head to this hospital in Paris and locate Professor Francois Bricaire, Chief of Infectious Diseases. Bricaire was one of a handful of civilian doctors the French military brought to Percy when they were running out of ideas. He declines our calls and emails, but we approach him anyway and suggest he speak directly with Miss Arafat. Also on the list is Dr. Jean-Charles Piet, another one of France's most distinguished infectious disease experts. We spend an hour together, and his interest and knowledge about the case is obvious, but he will not give an interview unless Professor Bricaire agrees to as well. While a meeting between those two doctors and Miss Arafat is under consideration, a letter comes from the French military police. It was their labs that ran multiple tests on Arafat's blood and urine, so they should have the samples. She asks us to be present as she opens the letter.
It said that they are incapable to give us any kind of blood or urine samples because they have been destroyed in the year of 2008 because nobody asked and they destroyed it.
Given Arafat's unexplained death, it seems like an odd decision to destroy his biological samples after just 4 years. Under French criminal code, labs are required to keep the samples up to 10 years. But then again, there was never any criminal investigation into Arafat's death. So it's a dead end. We will not be able to give this Swiss lab any additional quantities of Arafat's blood or urine to test for polonium. Meanwhile, the meeting we've arranged for Ms. Arafat begins. The French doctors refuse to allow us to be present.
These doctors told me that Yasser had nothing, that they searched every single illness in Yasser. And they told me they did not find anything. I was asking them, do they think that it's poison? They told me, we can't remove this thinking, we can't remove this aspect. He might be poisoned, but we don't know.
With the French doctors yielding little in France, we start to look elsewhere for leads.
The doctors that treated him initially from Tunisia and Egypt are really key witnesses for you. You'd need to check through every physical thing they did to him.
We ask Ms. Arafat to identify the Arab doctors.
Here, when all the doctors came, and these are the Egyptian doctors, who really, the Egyptian doctors were telling me that they think that he was poisoned. They felt that there is something wrong in it. This Dr. Haddati, the Tunisian doctor who came with us to the hospital.
That doctor right there?
Yes.
On the right?
On the right.
That's Dr. Hintati?
Yes. He thinks that Yasser was poisoned.
Our first stop, post-revolution Tunisia. With the dictatorship removed, our team arrives with optimism there will be fewer obstacles. But as we begin on the periphery and approach members of the original Arafat medical team, getting key details is harder than expected.
ما نعرفش نعرف فما حاجات فما رئيس البعثة الطبية هو اللي يشرف على شيء هذا كله.
Is that person Dr. Faisal Hintati?
تشوفوا مع الدكتور هنتاتي تعطيكم الأسامي بتاع الأطباء الآخرين اللي يخدموا في الفريق.
Through emails, phone calls, and finally a personal visit to this neurological clinic where he works, Dr. Faisal Hintati begs our producer, Naji Tamimi, to stop asking him questions. According to Ms. Arafat, it was Dr. Hintati who insisted that her husband had been poisoned.
احنا بنبحث عن الحقيقة يا دكتور وانت عارف انه في حقيقة.
الحقيقة ما هيش عندي، والله الحقيقة عند السياسيين، مش أنا في مرحلة جديدة وعنديش العائلة عندها كل شيء. ما تدخلونيش في معناها والله أشياء صعبة صرتوا الأشياء هذه هذا مقتول مش مقتول مسموم مش مسموم مشكلة كبيرة معناها مش صعب.
The only Tunisian doctor willing to offer useful insights was Dr. Shaban, an HIV expert who categorically ruled out AIDS as a cause of Arafat's death.
السؤال من وجهه أنا لنوجهه للسؤال لا إسرائيل ولا فرنسا. السؤال اللي ماذا بي أنا يجاوبوني عليه. السؤال يعني هل كان بإمكان الفلسطينيين في الوقت هذاك بالتعجيل بإخراج ياسر عرفات للعلاج باش ما يضيعش الوقت.
We don't have to go to Palestine to ask that question. As it turns out, Arafat's personal physician, the doctor who was with him from the onset of illness until his death in France, is living right here in Tunis. The PLO has since promoted Omar Daka as their deputy ambassador to Tunisia. After declining our interview requests, we head to their embassy.
ألو مرحبا.
أهلين.
دكتور كلمتك أنا قبل شوي ناجي من الجزيرة، كيف الحال؟
أهلا بك مرحبا.
وبتهمنا جدا إنه نوثق التفاصيل خصوصا من الناس اللي كانوا معاشينه بآخر لحظات.
شوف والله أقول لك أكون يعني صريح معك. أنا كل ما عندي من صغيرة وكبيرة موجود لدى كرام الله. وجلست معهم مرارا طويلا وكل التفاصيل عندهم.
Unsatisfied with that answer, we go inside the embassy to pay him a visit. We plead with Dr. Daka to change his mind and provide us his testimony.
So we've just left the office of Dr. Omar Daka. He was very uncomfortable that we were there. He said there's no chance he's going to give an interview despite him being with Arafat the entire time he was sick until death. He said this is not a medical issue, it's a political one.
We arrive in Egypt, another Arab country in transition. Suha Arafat had told us the lead Egyptian doctor had believed her husband was poisoned. We asked Dr. Zaki for more details.
We prepared to report to former president of the intelligence, Omar Suleiman. It's a part of routine. I mean, a team went there, he should report to his chiefs.
Hoping to get that report, we visit the offices of Dr. Ibrahim Mustafa, the lead physician from the Egyptian medical team.
So we've just come back from the office of Dr. Ibrahim Mustafa. He's the one who told the former First Lady his belief that Yasser Arafat was poisoned. He's not available, but we're just going to have to come back. He's way too important, and we need to find out what he has to say.
When we later return to Dr. Mustafa, he takes my name and quickly has us leave. He later calls us to explain that the Egyptian military has ordered his silence. Most of the doctors appeared too fearful to talk. Were we unreasonable to be asking questions about Arafat perhaps being poisoned? His most obvious enemy, Israel, has tried before to assassinate a Palestinian leader with a different undetectable poison.
Yasser Arafat is somebody who is in a very strong political position, who has lots of enemies. Among the factors that you're taking into account, thinking he might be poisoned and so on, is what we call previous criminality.
In 1997, Israel's Foreign Intelligence Service, known as Mossad, targeted this man, the political leader of the Hamas party, then living in the Jordanian capital.
Mossad sent somebody in Amman on the street in midday to inject liquid to Khalid Mashal, assuming that this will kill him.
It did not, because of the vigilance of his bodyguards. They captured the would-be assassins, a valuable bargaining chip that forced Israel to provide the antidote to save his life.
في الأردن انكشفت الجريمة لأن مرافقي أمسكوا بالموساد الإسرائيلي، فأصبح هناك برهان ودليل على تورط الإسرائيليين. في حالة ياسر عرفات لم يكن ثمة دليل مادي، وإن كانت قناعة الجميع أن إسرائيل وراء عملية الاغتيال.
Listen, if you give me proof, I will believe it, but you need to work hard to give such a proof.
The best evidence we have is the material being tested at the Institute for Radiation Physics. For 3 months, Professor Boshud's team has been working to establish whether the polonium in Arafat's belongings is what scientists call supported, that is, naturally occurring, or unsupported, meaning it was made in a nuclear lab.
Here is the bag. Okay, so here is the bag of Mr. Arafat. And, well, as you can see, there are many, many things inside, but here you have, for instance, his hospital hat. This is the hat he was wearing, according to his wife, until his last days, and it did contain a small blood stain that we did actually cut and measure, and we had an elevated value on polonium in this stain. If we look here, we can find actually the toothbrushes in which we cut the bristles and found that the quantity of polonium was significantly higher than what we were expecting. And as you can see, this toothbrush was kept in this box and also in the bag. So it's hard to imagine that polonium has been added afterward by natural ways.
And what percentage from the values in the toothbrush were from unsupported polonium?
It was really the majority, more than 60% of that was unsupported. This is the underwear that did contain the urine stain that actually had the highest value of polonium. That was, at the end of our measurement, unsupported polonium in large quantity. What we have here also is actually the hat he was wearing when he left Ramallah. It was in a much better state when we received it, but we took several samples at different locations, and the conclusion was that we did find some significant polonium that was present in this sample. Well, all those samples were belongings from Mr. Arafat that were containing visible biological stains. That means they have been used, and we knew that he was wearing this clothing at the hospital, so we did measurements on these particular stains. These levels were substantial. They were significantly different, which shows that there is an abnormal, not normal quantity of polonium.
But you found unsupported polonium in these specific items?
Yes, we did. We did find some not supported polonium in these samples. Yes.
Significant levels of unsupported polonium, made in a laboratory, exactly the variety that killed Litvinenko. We asked Professor Boshud that if Arafat had been given the same dosage as Litvinenko, what levels of polonium they could expect to find in his samples after 8 years. It's a simple equation, because polonium decays by half every 138 days.
Yes, if we take the scenario of Mr. Litvinenko, 1 gigabecquerel at the beginning would come to about 10 millibecquerel, and what was astonishing in our case was that we found values in the samples of Mr. Arafat that were in the same order of magnitude. We were surprised, yes. One of my colleagues, he called me on the phone and told me, well, I think you got to go up in the lab and we have something to show you. The first measurement we did was actually just a routine measurement, just to make a check, and we thought there is definitely no chance to find any polonium in these samples.
So who would have access to this kind of polonium, unsupported polonium?
If you want to have access to this kind of highly strategic element, you need to have a good connection with people who are maybe interested in or building nuclear weapons, for instance. Every country that has a nuclear reactor, even a civil nuclear reactor, you can produce polonium-210. It is possible.
What makes polonium a sophisticated choice of poison is the fact that with so few known cases, doctors are still uncertain about its specific symptoms.
If we put together all the information that we have, analytical findings, clinical features, circumstance of the death of Mr. Arafat, it's difficult to conclude. I don't want to make too much speculation, but I think that we have at this stage where would be, of course, mandatory to go further and to try to make more investigation if it's possible.
The answer may lie beneath Arafat's mausoleum in Ramallah, currently being renovated.
I would say that if I take a bone randomly in a cemetery, the probability of measuring polonium would be almost zero. In this case, if I had to give a probability, I would say right now, with the measurements we did, it would be maybe above 50% or something like this. So it's definitely not 99%, but it's above 50%. And I think the only way now, if she really wants to know what happened to her husband, is to manage to find a sample, an exhumation from Mr. Arafat that would provide us with a sample that should have a very high quantity of polonium if he were poisoned. But we have to do it quite fast because polonium is decaying. So if we wait too long, for sure, any possible proof will disappear.
For the first time, Ms. Arafat sees the results. Suha? Ms. Arafat? What do you want to do next?
I think that I want to ask to exhume the body of my husband immediately, because the doctors say that we don't have enough time. Longer we don't do it, the longer that the proofs of any polonium substance will disappear. I think this is my responsibility as a mother, as a wife, and as a partner of this great man for 20 years. And this is my message to the Palestinian Authority, that they have to cooperate, because the grave and the tomb of Yasser is in Ramallah. After all what we have discovered with the most credible doctors in the whole world, we have to go further step to exhume Yasser Arafat's body to reveal the truth to all the Arab and the Muslim world.